asking what are there to show for billions of naira spent over the past 9 or 10 years in the Niger Delta. President Bwala has ordered a forensic audit of the operations of NDDC from 2001 to 2019. And the federal government says there are no plans to do away with fuel subsidy. The Minister of Petroleum for State, Timi Presivo, stated this when he appeared before the National Assembly Joint Committee on Petroleum to defend the ministry's budget. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Seun Okinbale. We're bringing you tonight some of the major talking points in the nation's political landscape tonight. So get a seat and let's get talking, everyone. Some of the major stories that gets us talking. First, let's give you an understanding of what happened in the nation's capital today. You can describe it as perhaps one of the most fruitful meetings that you would think of, as President Bwala approved the sum of 10 billion naira for the completion of the ongoing rehabilitation work on the Enugu International Airport. So governors of the Southeast states met with the president to discuss pressing issues affecting the region. The chairman of the Southeast Governors Forum and leader of the delegation, Governor Dave Umahi of Ebonyi State, also requested a special intervention for the speedy completion of the airport and the rehabilitation of federal roads in the region. They also asked for the declaration of a state of emergency on roads in the Southeast region.
For a special funding release for the takeoff of the reconstruction of the Akanwebiam International Airport in Enugu State. And we told him the need for the special fund we're asking for release. But graciously, he had already done that. And so we gave Mr. President standing ovation. And our people are very excited, very happy, and we appreciate Mr. President for doing that.
Well, there are more stories to talk about tonight. Let's check out some other stories that are not a talking point, but are also political stories in our political roundup.
The People's Democratic Party in Akwa Ibom State has debunked reports in some sections of the media suggesting that Governor Domi Manuel and the PDP have adopted a certain aspirant for the 2023 governorship election. The State Publicity Secretary of the party, Mr. Inie Memabong, presented the party's position at the press conference in Uyo, the state capital.
We wish to state for the records that as a party, the discussion of 2023 is still very unripe and immature at this moment.
Preparations for the Bayelsa State governorship election slated for the 16th of November is in top gear, especially for the two main parties. And the governor of the state, Teraka Dixon, has asked residents not to be coerced or intimidated to vote for any candidate against their wish. The governor, who says is confident that his party will emerge victorious, says that he was not moved by the frequent defections of some of his party members to the opposition party.
Nobody should be intimidated. And perhaps let me also add, nobody should be induced to vote this way or that.
The Kayode Fayemi administration in Ekiti State has assured civil servants that salary arrears owed them by the last administration will be paid. The governor says it has defrayed inherited debts to the tune of 31 billion naira since assumption of office. The governor made the statement while making the State of the State address at the House of Assembly.
We have been consistent with the payment of salaries and pensions of our workers. It is a violation of fundamental human rights for people to labor in vain.
The Abia State government has emphasized on the need for all sectors to work together for the overall interest of the state and called on them to succeed against all odds. Governor Okezigbe also gave this charge at the swearing-in of commissioners to serve in his cabinet.
So let's begin the conversation, everyone. The federal government says there are no plans to do away with fuel subsidy. The Minister of Petroleum Resources, Timi Peresiva, stated this when he appeared before the National Assembly Joint Committee on Petroleum to defend the ministry's budget. This is as different committees of the House of Reps also received some other ministers for their budget defenses.
The consumption that is being posted on a daily basis, it doesn't represent the actual consumption of petroleum products in this country. We don't believe that Nigerians are consuming over 60 million liters a day. There's a lot of smuggling. And because the petroleum product is cheaper in Nigeria, a lot of our neighbors are taking advantage of the cheaper prices in Nigeria. So Nigeria is now almost subsidizing half of Africa, which is very difficult for us to do. So you can see that the government is doing something about controlling some of these leakages. And once those leakages are in place, we believe that subsidy can be at least bearable, the cost of subsidy. If I talk about fixing the refineries, that's also another way of dealing with the same issue. If we fix the refineries and we're able to pump from the refineries, that will also reduce the cost of subsidy on the government. So the government is looking at it more from that angle than from the angle of removing subsidy. So it is not on the card at all.
That is on one hand. If you don't understand what fuel subsidy means, in simple and layman terms, it means that whatever amount you are buying fuel, either petrol or any other kind of fuel that you're using, the federal government of Nigeria is subsidizing for you. Federal government is paying a certain amount so that you can pay less. That is what it means. So a lot of people believe that should not be. That paying subsidy, there are other people who are enjoying some monies that go into it. That's another debate for another day. We'll discuss whether or not fuel subsidy should be or should not on the program tonight. Another issue we'll be discussing tonight is the issue of the NDDC. And the federal government of President Bwala is not happy. He was worried by the persistent criticisms of the operations of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC. President Muhammadu Bwala has ordered a forensic audit of the operations of the organization from 2001 to 2019, receiving governors of the states that make up the commission, led by Governor Seriake Dixon of Bayelsa State. Earlier today, President Bwala said, what is presently on the ground in the South-South region does not justify the huge resources that have been made available to the organization. Let me quote the president. He said, I try to follow the act setting up these institutions, especially the NDDC, with the amount of money that the federal government has religiously allocated to the NDDC. We would like to see the result on the ground. Those that are responsible for that have to explain certain issues. The project said to have been done must be verifiable. You just cannot say you spend so much billions and when the place is visited, one cannot see the structures that have been done. And of course, that's President Muhammadu Buhari's words for you. Where are those monies? Where are the projects? Let's talk about this and the issue of the fuel subsidy. Joining me from our Abuja studio, two gentlemen, a lawyer and a political analyst. Both of them are of different political divide. Mr. Ken Okolugbo is a political analyst and a member of the PDP. Mr. Daniel Bwala is an advisor, legal advisor to the Deputy Senate President and a member of the APC. He's a lawyer. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. Let's first of all delve into the matter of fuel subsidy. The federal government says that there is no plan to remove subsidy. If you look at what is budgeted for fuel subsidy in the 2020 budget, we understand about 450 billion naira is budgeted for it. Let me begin with you, Mr. Okolugbo. Is it justified to have subsidy to stay?
Well, in the first place, it's funny that the government has actually accepted now that there has always been fuel subsidy. If you remember in 2016, they said there was no subsidy, it was under recovery. Barrow was actually accused as a former managing director of NNPC of using the LNNG funds to the tune of over $1 billion. In fact, he accepted that he used 320 billion for fuel subsidy. And as at that point in time, it was only the NNPC that was actually importing these products because the petroleum marketers said they were not going to be able to import because of the certain measures that had been put in place. They were not able to get letters of credit and other issues that were at stake. Now, if NNPC is the sole importer of petrol, why is it very difficult for us to have a breakdown of how much this subsidy is being paid? We don't even have a forensic data of the exact quantity of fuel that is consumed. Yes, we agree that fuel can be smuggled across the border. The borders are presently closed. The 2019 budget was 305 billion naira. Why has it jumped to 450 billion in 2020? It doesn't make sense to me, the increment.
Bwala, is it justifiable to keep fuel subsidy? And in the regime of the operation of the fuel subsidy, what are your take on your reactions to this?
Well, the dynamics of fuel subsidy, quite frankly, is complicated because you can argue on both sides. Those who are in favor of fuel subsidy are looking at it from the perspective that the larger population of the Nigerian people are poor. They are the major consumers of petroleum products by the use of public transportation, generator, and so on and so forth. And that if you take away the fuel subsidy, the impact will be negatively felt more by them than privately owned owners of vehicles and industries. But then, if you look at the fact that there is this frequent increase in fuel price, as well as the increase of population, which will also affect the fuel subsidy, you will discover that it is not a sustainable program, quite frankly. It is something you can apply in the short term as a palliative measure, but in the long term, fuel subsidy regime is not going to be sustainable. Because look at it this way. If you take away fuel subsidy and can guarantee that the poor man will not have to worry about buying fuel for generator, will not have to worry about spending so much on public transport, it won't be the problem of the poor man that the subsidy is removed and the price of items have gone up, because in the long run, he is benefiting more. He will benefit in the area of infrastructure. But the people who are also in favor of fuel subsidy are saying so because they don't have confidence in the management of the resources. And let's be honest, the corruption has pervaded the national life of the Nigerian people. If today you say you are taking out fuel subsidy, whatever is the money that is realized as a result of that, can you guarantee that it will be used judiciously to bring infrastructure, to bring comprehensive health care, to bring education to the Nigerian people? That's the problem. So it's about the government coming to, muzzling, having a political will, so to speak, when you can tell that you will sit on it and ensure that if you take out subsidy, you will deliver on the goods from the proceeds of the removal. But if you can't, then you will be left with no choice but to continue to subsidize for fuel.
Bwala, we saw the Occupy Nigeria, the protests across Nigeria at the time in 2012. At that time, a lot of agitation on the removal of fuel subsidy because of the issues of the corruption in the regime of the operations of the fuel subsidy. Let me ask you, and we'll go on break, but I want to ask you, and I need you to answer straight away so that Mr. Okolugbo also can answer in similar fashion. Would you suggest that fuel subsidy should be stopped perhaps after 2020?
I believe that fuel subsidy, we have to come to terms to remove the fuel subsidy. The IMF that we are going to asking for money, see, who pays the piper will dictate the tune. They will always have policies. And it has been proven all around the world, countries that produce fuel, countries that subsidize more are not able to deliver on the democracy to the people. So I think in Nigeria, given the circumstances and the situation, the rising fuel prices, the increase in population, fuel subsidy is not sustainable.
One sentence and we go on break, Mr. Okolugbo. Fuel subsidy to stay or to go? Your view?
Interestingly, those that kicked against fuel subsidy not to be removed are the same people that are saying now that this fuel subsidy has to stay. If landing cost of fuel is 185 naira and you are actually selling at the pump for 145 naira, can we sustain the difference in the price? The answer is that we're just postponing the evil day. That's the truth.
We go on break, and when we come back, it comes down to the issue of governance and getting value for the billions and billions of naira that is being spent in this nation every day. Our eyes are going to be on the NDDC, the Niger Delta, and the monies, billions that have been spent from 2001 to 2019. The president says a forensic audit will have to be done. Our focus next. Join us again, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone. So a lot of people were wondering, what is NDDC? For those of you who do not know, the full is an abbreviation of Niger Delta Development Commission. How did this come? It came after an agitation that there is no development in the Niger Delta region where Nigeria's economy mainstay is coming from. That is the home of Nigeria's oil refining and all that. So 9-10 years down the line, the president, Muhammadu Bwala, is asking that most of the projects that are being allocated, funds that are being allocated for this project, you cannot see these projects on the ground, and it needs to be probed. So he has ordered forensic auditing of the NDDC expenses from 2001 to 2019. Let me get my partner tonight to weigh in on this one. What does this mean? For the NDDC and the development in the Niger Delta. Mr. Okolugbo, let me begin with you. You have been a commissioner at the Desopadec in Delta State, and that's your region. What is happening? Is it true that when you get on the ground, you can see vivid interpretation of the monies that are being budgeted for the development of the region on the ground?
Well, nobody can fault what the president said. But when I was in Desopadec, there was something my governor used to say, he said, look, you people don't bite more than you can chew, and we need to see your star projects. And he also put a system of checks and balance where he had another commissioner in the State Executive Council who was a supervisor, so to say, of the Desopadec project. Yes, I can't say it was all uhuru, but for me, NDDC sometimes could even budget what we had put in our budget in Desopadec. It was that bad. And sometimes people thought it was an act of fraud from not actually having that signage. So when Governor Dixon said what he said today when he visited the president, he was speaking from a vantage position. NDDC, actually, the forensic auditing of the NDDC has been long overdue. Long overdue in the sense that, apart from the money that comes from the federal government, don't forget that 3% of the oil, although it's not all the oil companies that have been remitting, 3% of profits from all the oil companies are supposed to be remitted back to the NDDC. And is an interventionist agency. And when you have an interventionist agency, which is what Desopadec also stands for, it means that in any way the other ministries, departments, and agencies can't function. They can quickly come and function. They can have emergency projects. But it's been sad because I really can't say that the NDDC has lived up to its calling. And so on that note, I support what the president said.
The National Assembly, the House of Representatives, I understand, are already even looking into the activities of NDDC and what is happening in that regard, on what they are doing. Some of the officials of NDDC had faced the committees at the National Assembly. Mr. Bwala, what are your thoughts on what is happening in that region and the monies that have been spent?
I'm really very happy and thankful to Okolugbo for being honest about the fact that there has not been activities in the Niger Delta as far as that commission is concerned. You see, because in the past, some of these projects were given to individuals, and the commission was meant to impact on the people. And that's why you couldn't see projects on ground. You see, up until 2015, and even way after 2015, there's rarely any project you can point at substantially to say, this is whether by way of intervention or whether by way of a project, that this is what NDDC is able to do. And there is this philosophy of toggery that you see around that place, that if you decide to go past them to impact directly on the people, then you start hearing cases of is it pipeline explosion or pipeline vandalism or something like that. Which is the reason why, in my view, I believe that the president has appointed a new board for NDDC. And I believe honestly that this new board will have to be on their foot working. And they are going to work. And so let's give them the time and let's watch. But the forensic audit that the president has caused, it's a welcome development because it will help us to see the activities of NDDC in prior and to see where their pitfalls were and how it can be avoided going forward.
Let's get, I want to get both of your final thoughts on the program. These intervention agencies, there is one that has been instituted also for the northeast region of the country, similar to the NDDC. Now, these commissions or these agencies have been set up to help development in this region. But then when you hear the stories of them not meeting up to expectation in some of their buildings and the monies that have been spent that are not being seen on the ground, how do we then be able to ensure that there is development and monies that are meant to be spent are being spent? Mr. Okolugbo, I'd like you to shoot first and your final words on the program.
Well, the thing about it is that I also remember the Southeast Development Commission was also passed by the 8th Senate. It's not about the commission, it's about the will of the people. Do you understand? It's about the people that you put on the driver's seat. Then you must put a lot of checks and balances because the Bible says the heart of man is desperately wicked. Who can know it? Where you are given money to develop your area and you use basically most of it for yourself, then it defeats the whole aim of the intervention program. And then again, another fear I also had was that the president said he was going to wait for the report of the forensic audit. There's a new board that has been put in place. One would have ordinarily thought that the names of those board members would have been sent to the Senate by now, and they would have gotten the ground running. Because there's also the danger of having people in acting capacity. Yes, you have a supervising minister for the first time being under the Niger Delta Ministry. But I think while the forensic audit is going on, it shouldn't stop the board from being inaugurated. I'm saying this from a position of experience, from what I saw when I was a commissioner in Delta. And it is very key that...
Let's allow Mr. Bwala, let's get your final word on how we can ensure that the monies being budgeted are being spent in real sense.
So this is how I think it should. The board, the commission operations officers must ensure that they avoid the negative and unnecessary influence of governors in the region on the commission. Because usually when governors are allowed to run the commission through the back door, you have more of the same. But if it's a commission that is tasked with a responsibility to operate devoid of the influence, negative I mean, of governors in the region, then you are likely going to see a functional and effective operations there. The president will have to, through the minister of the Niger Delta, ensure that the governors in those regions are not allowed to negatively influence the operations of the commission.
No, but you can't do it without the governors. There must be a synergy.
Negatively.
There must be a synergy. The governors are very important. There I disagree with you. The governors cannot work. I mean, they can't work in isolation. The governors are the drivers of projects. You must carry the governors along.
But when you allow them to negatively influence through appointment,
there I agree with you.
Through projects, through the management.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time tonight. Mr. Ken Okolugbo and Mr. Daniel Bwala, for your thoughts on some of these issues tonight. Well, that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Akimbale. Bye-bye.